Number 7, the Honourable
Thank you,
Annette
Mr
King.
Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his statements after almost 7 years as Prime Minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes. Yes, especially the statement I made that if I was Annette King, I'd be ashamed of the fact that I didn't fund a septum when I was Minister of Health.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. I wasn't the Minister then, Prime Minister. I wasn't the Minister. I wasn't the
Order.
I wasn't the Minister.
Order.
No.
Well, I hope it is a point of order. Point of order, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I seek leave to table when Annette King was Minister of Health from 2000-2005.
Order. I don't think that information... Order. That information's available to members if they so wanted.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
Supplementary question, Paula. Why does he stand by all his statements on health when Ian Sutherland, a heart patient with chest pains, was discharged from hospital in his pyjamas, was told to catch a bus to Palmerston North, and if he wanted to replace his pyjamas, he should go to the op shop?
Mr. Speaker, because under a national-led government we are now doing 50,000 more elective surgical operations than 2008, because under a national-led government we've increased the number of first specialist appointments up from 430,000 to 542, because under a national-led government there are 5,500 more doctors and nurses in our DHBs, and under a national-led government children under 13 can go to the doctor for free. That's why I stand behind Jonathan Coleman and National Under Health.
Well, let's have another one then. Well, in light of that answer...
I haven't called the member yet.
Oh, sorry, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
In light of that answer, why should he stand by all his statements on health, including the one he's just given us, when Ken Smith, like thousands of others, can't get surgery for his bone-on-bone knee condition, but his surgeon said, quote, "If I could do your knee tomorrow, I would. There is just no money," end of quote.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think it's a bit rich coming from Annette King, because when she was Minister of Health, the number of first specialist assessments went down. When Annette King was Minister of Health, people used to go to Australia to get treatment, Mr Speaker. And I remember when they used to be held out in bays outside of hospitals. Mr Speaker, the reason she was no longer Minister of Health was because Helen Clark dumped her. That's why.
Order.
Supplementary question,
Supplementary
Mr Speaker.
question. Order.
Put some gin in it.
Order.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Order. I just require less interjection from both sides, particularly the front bench. The Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did he know that Bill English has said health needs $600 to $700 million a year to meet demand? So why did the health budget receive half that amount increase this year, resulting in children waiting for months on end with rotten and abscessed teeth because there's not enough funding?
The Honourable
Mr Speaker, for a start, just to get the facts on the table around health spending, it was $11.8 billion in 2008-9 under a Labor government. It's $15.9 billion, so up 33%. But, Mr Speaker, just to prove that spending money doesn't necessarily fix your problems, between 2000 and 2008, 761 cancer patients were flown to Australia, and I quote the Dominion Post when it said about the Labor government then, "It is inconceivable the government could spend so much money but make the system worse." That is the words of the Dominion Post.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
Is he aware the Ministry of Health warned the Minister that after $1.7 billion in spending cuts since 2010, quote, "easy wins are exhausted and major cuts are needed," end quote, which has led to thousands of New Zealanders being turned away from even seeing a specialist?
For the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Let us go through a simple maths examination. $11.8 billion was the starting point of health spending. If we take off the 1.7 of cuts that Annette King's told the country, we'd be at 10.1, and the answer is we're actually spending $15.9 billion. I rest my case.
You can't even do your maths.
Order.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question.
It was actually quite a strong subject of mine, but be that as it may, the Honourable Annette King.
Are grey power out of touch, or as he likes to say, just rent a crowd, when they protest at the current state of health care of older New Zealanders, which see frail old New Zealanders dumped off surgery lists and their home care cut by half.
That's right. Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, accept I haven't seen the President of Grey Power for a wee while because he hasn't made an appointment to come and see me. But the last time he came to see me, Mr. Speaker, he came to my office and said, "Let's have a cup of tea. Things are going so well, I've got nothing to talk about." That's exactly what he said.
Order. 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 Question number 8, Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr.